Er zijn 3 dingen in het leven van een kunstenaar. Ten eerste, te kunnen werken. Ten tweede, goed te kunnen werken. En ten derde, de grootst mogelijke weerklank bij zijn publiek te vinden.
Who's afraid of art? Tyrants and wannabe tyrants, so it seems.
Artist Alexandra Skotchelenko has been sentenced to 7 years in prison by St. Petersburg's invasion, spreading false information, disinformation.
With autocracy growing, with tyrants on the roll, the Balie brings together over 40 international artists, writers and thinkers during Forum on European Culture. We celebrate the subversive power of art and literature and curate works of opposition that preserve the histories autocrats want to erase and imagine the futures they fear.
So my question is, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Art against the tyrants. Not for the faint-hearted.
Everyone, and welcome to the European Literature Night, which is part of the Forum on European Culture. And this is an event that we host every year, and we invite different authors from different European countries every year. And I'm very excited to host this event this evening. My name is Veronica Baas, program editor here, together with
Viola Kaassen. I'm program maker for the Goethe Institut here in the Netherlands, and I'm also part of the EUNIC network, EUNIC Netherlands network, which is, the collaborator for the Balie for this event. It's the European Union National Institutes for Culture, a network of European national culture institutions and embassies.
Yes, and all those cultural networks have brought wonderful authors here tonight to talk about literature, to talk about what literature may do, how political it always is or may be or should be, what it can provoke in the readers. Like I said, we have 7 authors. That means that we could organize 7 evenings because they're all really great. But it also means that we will be not doing them justice at all, but rather we will be trying to look at common themes and discuss this theme against indifference. And we want to start the evening by a reading that is already proposing some thoughts on this subject, so we can discuss it later on. Viola, do you want to introduce our...
Yes, with this I want to invite our first guest on the stage, Alicja Gescinska. Please welcome to the stage. She's a Polish-Belgian philosopher, writer and poet. She obtained her master's degree in moral sciences from the Ghent University and earned her PhD in philosophy in 2012. She currently serves as the director of the Philosophy by Research program at the University of Buckingham. And in addition to her scholarly work, Gescinska is a prominent public intellectual in Belgium and the Netherlands. She has authored several publications, including her well-received philosophical reflection, The Verovering van de Vrijheid, The Conquest of Freedom, and her debut novel, A Soort van Liefde, A Kind of Love. And tonight she is going to read from her essay on Totalitarianism and Art as a Moral and Political Force, which was printed in the magazine Common Ground, published by the European Culture Foundation. And I think you probably all received one when you walked inside the door. At least I hope you do. And in this magazine you can read the article in full length next to other lovely contributions. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's fine. History is a book of warnings. And one of the important warnings for today's world is this. Be suspicious of politicians who single out the cultural elite as an enemy to be controlled. If not, completely crushed. One only needs to look at the 20th century to find plenty of evidence showing that artists and intellectuals are one of the primary targets of despots dictators, tyrants, and totalitarian leaders. This raises important questions. What is the reason that anti-democratic leaders so intensely dislike the cultural elite? Is it fear or hatred? Maybe both. This question is important not merely for a better understanding of history. It is important because the totalitarian temptation is not a thing of the past. In today's world, democracies are having a hard time. The totalitarian temptation and the lure of authoritarianism are omnipresent. If we look at Belarus, for example, we see that a significant number of political prisoners of Lukashenko's regime consists of artists. The plight of Uyghurs in China is also, once again, evidence of the same phenomenon. Those who seek to control society, control and crush members of the cultural elite. I believe that perhaps the main reason behind this phenomenon is this. If you want to control society, you need to control what people do. And if you want to control what people do, you need to control what they think and feel. Here we touch upon a quintessential feature of art. Art can serve many purposes and take on many forms. But one of the key characteristics of a work of art is that it stimulates the mind and the heart. Art can be a means to denounce and criticize what goes wrong in society. And anti-democratic leaders, authoritarian and totalitarian leaders do not cope well with criticism. Art can evoke images of a future that is incompatible with the future those in power envisage. Art can do many great things, but first and foremost, art awakens us from our existential slumber. Art evokes feelings and ideas. As such, art is an antidote to indifference. And that is precisely why totalitarian regimes seek to control artistic expression, because one of the crucial pillars of a totalitarian regime, of all totalitarian regimes, is indifference of the masses. Once again, there is an abundance of historical evidence to support this claim. Famously captured, for example, by Elie Wiesel's claim that the opposite of love is not hatred, but indifference. Others too have argued that indifference is a driving force of totalitarianism, that the sound of boots marching in the streets is only made possible by the silence of slippers in living rooms. One of the most poignant descriptions of this phenomenon can be found in the Gulag memoirs of the Polish philosopher Barbara Skarga. Skarga spent 10 years in different Gulag camps and more than 1 year in external exile on a kolkhoz in East Siberia. Both in her philosophical writings and in her memoir, Skarga frequently reflects about the cruelty man is capable of, and which she experienced firsthand. Skarga also observed that communist repression was fueled by indifference, and the Gulag camps were a means to make those who did not comply indifferent. She wrote, and I quote, "And so gradually we lose our soul, day after day, with hunger, with work that exceeds our strength, with the hopelessness of time. Something seeps into us, drop by drop, something that must be named. What seeps into us is the permission of evil. We can no longer worry about it. We merely shrug our shoulders." End quote. Such an inducement to indifference is entirely opposed to what art does to human beings. A work of art invites us not to shrug our shoulders. It confronts us with things we need to worry about. If we look at a painting, read a book, listen to music, we engage in a relationship with another person, and as such, with the whole world. We empathize and learn to understand the perspective of another. Each confrontation with a work of art relies on and stimulates our empathic capabilities. And once there is empathy, there is no longer indifference. Then a crucial pillar of totalitarianism starts crumbling down. If art can stimulate empathy and understanding between individuals, it can also stimulate understanding and solidarity within society. As such, art stimulates the consolidation of democracy, which relies in many ways on our empathy, understanding, and solidarity. Many philosophers have observed that art can play a crucial social role. Music, for example, stimulates our moral emotions and capacities, particularly our capability to sympathize with and understand the perspective of others in their otherness, all of which are indispensable for solidarity and peaceful coexistence. Music leads to a désarmement de cœur, a disarmament of hearts, as the French philosopher Vladimir Jankélévitch beautifully expressed. He maintains that music is a conversation, a sort of dialogue between the one who makes music and the one who listens to it. It's a duo de cœur, a duet of hearts. Another example is the American philosopher Martha Nussbaum. She argues in many of her works that art plays a crucial role in the development of man towards a responsible, committed, democratic citizen of the world. She links the emotional influence of music on human beings to the development of our empathic capabilities. We explore aspects of our own vulnerability inherent to human condition. The emotional structure of a work of music sharpens our sensitivity to the sorrow in the world. Music increases our empathic and moral capabilities because it invites us to listen to what other persons have to say. It makes us familiar with their view. The meaning of music in our moral development is therefore of the utmost importance and resides in the development of sympathy through dialogue. What applies to music applies to other forms of art as well. Many studies have shown that reading books stimulates our empathic capabilities as well. Reading and literature are important for several reasons, and one could easily fill countless bookshelves with books about the importance of books. Books are important in themselves as sovereign works of art, as bearers of aesthetic value. However, they also have a derived value that goes beyond the boundaries of the aesthetic. When we read, we learn to adopt the perspective of the other, and as such, come to a better understanding of the other person. Through books, we develop cognitive capabilities, our linguistic capabilities, but also our ability to concentrate and to the power of our imagination. Moreover, reading does not only stimulate our minds, it leads to the growth in another area, our hearts. Literature exerts a deep influence on the development of our interpersonal and psychological capabilities. Philosophers, writers, and lovers of literature have known this since time immemorial. And now there is also increasing scientific evidence to support this claim. Literature improves our capability to sympathize with the sorrows of others. Books increase our understanding of others. The central word is once again empathy. Reading is an exercise in empathy. Empathy is the capacity to be involved in the minds and the lives of others. Empathy is a quality that allows us to live our lives to the fullest, not next to each other, and certainly not at the expense of each other, but with each other. Here, the immense value of translations also comes to the fore, because they open our minds and hearts to a world far beyond our own. Translators are all too often unsung heroes of literature. They are the conditio sine qua non of our ability to empathize across the borders of languages and cultures. Thanks to translators, we are able to empathize with the world and people far away. We are able to adopt an eccentric perspective, if I may borrow the terminology of Olga Tokarczuk. Tokarczuk, arguably one of the quintessential European writers of today, both in style and spirit, in temper and topic, has repeatedly stressed how important writers are. In one of her essays, Tokarczuk once emphasized that without translators, we would not be able to know others, to know ourselves, and we would not be able to cooperate. Translators help us to transcend our self-centeredness and invite us to adopt an eccentric attitude. We can look at the world from another person's perspective. And therein lies the pacifying force of literature and translating. They deepen our understanding of others, and the better we understand each other, the less likely to ruin each other. Thanks to literature, man is more than a wolf to man. As both history and the present painfully teaches us, humans are capable of treating others as things and as beasts, of dehumanizing the other. The worst evil begins when we no longer see another person as a human. Yet, at the same time, we are also capable of humanizing each other, of fighting the dehumanizing forces in the world, of treating others as an end in themselves. Totalitarian regimes use scapegoating mechanisms to dehumanize certain groups in society, minorities, different ethnic groups, people from different countries. But literature and art undermine such scapegoating mechanisms. They can show other human beings as exactly what they are. Other human beings just like us. Humans have always been the plaything of humanizing and dehumanizing forces. And it is this perpetual process of humanization and dehumanization that art in general, and literature in particular, have a huge role to play. They form a humanizing bulwark against dehumanization and existential alienation. Art and the humanities can reinforce the value that serve as the moral glue holding our society together, making them indispensable to a stable, peaceful democracy. And yet, we cannot deny a profound truth in George Steiner's claim that art is ultimately powerless against totalitarianism. Steiner famously argued that humanities do not humanize at all. Humanities do not humanize. Despite all art and love for beauty in the world, people are still capable of doing the most terrible things to each other. Steiner found it terribly hard to understand and was even moved to tears when he reflected about it. Why and how many ardent supporters of the Nazis in Germany could be highly intelligent and cultivated people who loved art as much as they despised the other in his otherness. Indeed, it's a truth. The music of Schubert or the paintings of Caspar David Friedrich did not stop the trains to Auschwitz. a person with a civilized mind can still have a brutal heart. We should recognize that art does not guarantee the fostering of solidarity, empathy, and understanding. And it is indeed difficult to understand why a lover of art can be such a hater of mankind. But perhaps the words of music philosopher Jan Kelevich can help us to understand this paradox. Jan Kelevich concludes his study of Gabriel Fauré with the words that music, the charm of Fauré's brilliance, builds a bridge between people, connecting the heart of one person to another. Music, literature, art, the humanities, all of that. They stimulate our feelings of sympathy and understanding. They can connect our hearts. But, obviously, and herein lies the secret or the difficulty, only on the condition that we have a heart and we use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicja. We will be hearing from you after the break again, but now we will continue to discuss your piece. So if there's someone saying something outrageous, please wave at me. But I will be discussing the great things you said with a panel that Viola will introduce.
Yes, with this I would like to ask our next, our panelists on the stage, Yusra Bimfki, Lauren Bastide and Philipp Oemke. Yusra Bimfki holds a PhD in human rights law, for which she was awarded the Max van der Stoel Human Rights Awards. She's also a writer, poet, and spoken word artist. She has been an established name on Belgium stages for many years, ranging from the Beaux-Arts to the Roma, from Arenberg to Theater aan de Zee. Her work was published in literary magazines such as Kluger Hans, DWB, The Poëziekrans, The Revisor, and The Gids, while her columns have been featured in journals like The Standard, Knack, and De Morgen. Lauren Bastide is a French author and journalist with a degree in political science and gender studies. In January 2024, she launched Folie Douce, a series of conversations about mental health with artists, activists, authors, and personalities of all kinds to discuss their mental health journeys. In 2016, she created the podcast La Poudre, featuring long interviews with female artists, activists, and politicians. Lauren also holds the author of essays Présents and Futures. She wrote the non-fiction book translated to How Feminism Will Help Us to Save the World, and the fictional writing Courir l'escargot and 2060. And last but not least, Philipp Oemke. He grew up in the German city Bonn and studied journalism at the Columbia University. After 4 years working for the magazine of the renowned magazine Süddeutsche Zeitung, he switched to Der Spiegel. In 2015, he moved to New York, where he practiced as a journalist, returned to Berlin in 2020. He is the head of the cultural sector of the Der Spiegel, for which he is recently taking a sabbatical to write his sequel of his book, Schönwald. His biography of the German punk band Die Toten Hosen spent several weeks on the bestseller list, as did his debut, Schönwald.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. Yeah, I'm very interested. How did you listen to Alicia's essay? Laurent, do you have first thoughts?
Well, thank you so much for this reading. It was a very powerful thinking, and you brought so many artists and references to as an introduction to this night. While listening to you, I couldn't help thinking about Virginia Woolf. As a feminist, I always come back to her. It's really hard to go to the next step because she basically said everything. And I think it's important as a feminist to also ask who is able to access this cultural elite you mentioned, and it shows how this question is really political, because these tyrants we're fighting here, if there is one thing they don't want, is that women, people of color, queer people get access to culture and become able to produce books and music and paintings. So it shows that, I mean, we should fight for this cultural elite to be able to keep up speaking and producing speaking piece of arts, but we should also fight right now for everybody to be able to access their room of one's own. And because, yeah, to produce art, you need to be healthy, you need to have a roof on your head, you need to have time for yourself, and we know that this is harder for women. So yeah, that's what my thoughts were going when I was listening to your beautiful reading.
Yes, thank you. Philip, is there something you noticed particularly?
Yeah, I found it very inspiring too. And when I wrote this novel, I thought a lot about this, whether it was okay to put my mind into people and things that I don't like and I wouldn't agree with. So can you explore the evil side of life or the immoral side of life using literature? Being a journalist, I often came to my limits when I tried to explore something as the far right in the US, and couldn't really, at some point you have to speculate, because they tell you something, you know, they don't really mean it, they mean something else. There's a subtext. The subtext is speculation. I know it's true, but I can't prove it, and I can't do that in journalism. But literature or art in general gives you the opportunity to actually explore it, to dive into it, to put yourself into their minds, and by that actually understand them better, and then also as a reader at some point be able to see their perspective and actually being able to fight them better or resist them.
Yeah, we will dive into that a little later when we will discuss your work. The difficulty that one of the things that Alicja brought up is this tension of you can enjoy great art and still not have a heart as you finish the piece. Like, how do you look at that?
That's a big thing in Germany. I mean, what you just quoted about the Nazis, some of them were like really cultural people and minds, and they didn't pretend that. They were really Goering or Goebbels. They were really interested in classical music and art and paintings, and they enjoyed it and still were monsters. And that's something that is interesting about art. Then I think there's no way for us to connect arts and moral. It's been done or tried a lot of times. It doesn't really work. Art in itself cannot be directly connected to moral, and I think we always, as artists, I always think about we want to be political, we want to have an impact, especially in times like this that we're experiencing now, but at the same time we are not activists, at least the way I see myself. And I think if you're an activist, and that's important, but there's a chance that the art that you produce is not that good, because art is not that clear. It's always ambiguous, it's contradictory, it poses problems, and there's no straightforwardness in art, I believe, and that's why it's always difficult to connect art and moral.
I don't think Yusra thinks you cannot be an activist and an artist at the same time.
We were both, I think.
Make the case for why activists are great artists or can be great artists.
I don't think I want to do that, because I don't agree with the premise of this idea. This idea that you are a writer, and then there's other labels that you can get on top of being a writer, such as the label of an activist or a feminist writer. But activist writer for me is a very tricky one. It's something that for a while I got, that was, anyway, doesn't matter if it was said about my work or not, but what I find problematic, really actually problematic, so it's funny, but it's also not funny, about this label of activist writer. First of all, I wonder what we mean by that, yeah? So what is an activist precisely, and how do they differ from a writer? But for me, it takes away something that is actually essential to writership, which is to care about the world. The work that, for instance, of mine or of other people's work that I love, when it's called activistic, it's actually often when it relates to certain structures of violence in the world in a critical way, that in no way at all actually diminishes the literary quality of the work. But to call someone an activist writer or to call yourself a writer who's not activist, I think really pulls away that essential, for me, I can only speak for myself, that essential thing that I do as a writer, which is to care about the world. If I do not care about the world, I would not be writing. And this caring about the world is often what is called activist writing. And I find that, problematic, because what are we then if we are not caring? Commodities, here for your entertainment, or also only for easy truths when political climate is ready for it?
I wouldn't connect caring and being an activist. I wouldn't make that connection at all.
That's what I do. And I think often what happens when institutions or other people label certain writers as activists, because I know of no writer who has called themselves activists. Not a single one. It is a label that is put on writers often when they are dangerous to the public discourse, to the dominant truths. It's a way to delegitimize them. Sorry, I'm getting a bit triggered. But what I observe, and what I observe in my work and in the work of colleagues, is when the label of activist writer is put on them, it is precisely in the cases when a work of art is caring and daring in its caring and maybe public in its caring, but therefore not less artistic for it. I think Arundhati Roy is a good example. Arundhati Roy, I see some people nodding. Would anyone in the room argue that her work is not literary? Of course not. Her work is brilliant in its literary qualities, and she is what people call an activist. But she does not call herself an activist. That's what people call Arundhati Roy. You can Google it. People call her an activist writer.
If I can help you here, Yusra, I think she's referring to the fact that, for example, I can call, in French, it would be militante. Like, this way of calling me militante is a way of despising my work. Like, I form text and I write literature the same way everybody writes literature. And this is despising to my work. This is a way to disqualify my work. And this label is very often used to blame the point of view of people who fight for certain, like, gender discrimination or race discrimination. But what's funny is that when you have a neutral book, a book that is not fighting against discrimination, for example, it's not being called activist, when it is. Every point of view is political, and our point of view as women, or as someone who fights racism or queer phobia, is qualified as non-neutral, as an opposition to this position of the world is fine as it is, which is a very activist position. Someone who doesn't want to fight for a better world is actually fighting for the world to stay as it is or to end worse. So I think I'm very familiar to what Yusra has described, because it triggers me also a little. And I guess, Philippe, what we're meaning is that activists should be proud, actually. And I know many feminist writers around me that have inversed the stigma by saying, I'm an activist, sure, that's not an insult. But it's often used as an insult.
And I believe in the reclaiming, but I don't think I deserve the label activist. I don't even think I deserve it. The real activist for me is Greta Thunberg and so many others who are doing the work, you know? They are on the boat, they are on the street, they are in the school.
That's not art. That doesn't have anything to do with art.
That's why I'm saying
great
I don't...
activists, but you kind of raised the impression that I had anything against activists. On the contrary, I think it's very, very important.
No, I don't think, and I think I've been really clear.
To trigger you.
No, but I want to be very clear what I reacted to. I reacted to this distinction that you made between activist writer and writer, where you added also that activism diminishes the work of an artist. That's what you said, and I reacted to that. I didn't react to you saying that activism is not good. I reacted to this distinction that you made, that is often made in the literary field and outside, between a writer and an activist writer. That's the only thing I reacted to. I did it with some temper, and then we're often discredited for being angry women. But it's just caring. I just care.
Caring. So do we think... Because do we think that... because I do think everyone agrees with that literature can enlarge that caring, right? Or is it, to quote Alicja, like literature and art can show human beings as exactly what they are, other human beings just like us? Is that... was this a rousing defense of that claim, what we just saw happening? Like, do we believe in the potential of literature?
No. We ask it.
Today, if you would have asked me a few years ago, I would answer very affirmatively to that question. Without a doubt, I would say yes, literature and art does do this. They foster our qualities of empathy and understanding and so forth. Today, I'm more doubtful. I'm very much in conflict with what art means and what art can do with my own work on an everyday basis. For the entire last year, I was not even able to write a single word on paper. Because if it were true, and it's a little bit what Alicja in the end touches upon, right? This observation that if it were true that art and literature does all the great things and empathy does all what we believe it to do, then we would not, I think, live in the world of today where the things are happening that are happening. I don't think you can marry that, which is what in the end, this tension in the end of we believe that art can do this and at the same time horrible things are happening. And in what is happening as well, it's not only, for instance, a live-streamed genocide happening on our screens for almost 2 years. How can that be possible if we claim to be as empathetic as we claim to be? These are things that cannot be wedded. There's an apparent contradiction, and I think we need to sit with that contradiction. I mean, no one has to do anything, but I try to sit with that contradiction. Not even by choice, but because I have no other way. It's something that sits in the way of my work every day. And what has been very clear, I think, it's something that we cannot deny. Judith Butler wrote about it last year, but many others have written about it, how, if anything, that the past 2 years have shown us is that still the observation is true that some deaths pull harder at our hearts than others, that some lives we deem more important or more worthy of our empathy, more deserving of our empathy than others. And I'm not saying that we do this in a deliberate way. I'm not saying that we do it consciously, but it's an observable fact. So how do you marry that? And for me, I think the only way to marry those observations is to bring in the factor of power. Also within the discourse of empathy, right? What I liked a lot about the essay also of Alicja is that this, I think twice in the essay, she speaks of others in their otherness. Others in their otherness. What I often see is, it's often very well meant that people say, children in Gaza are being murdered. Imagine it being your child. Or women. So, for instance, imagine it being your sister who was assaulted or sexually harassed, or your mother. And I mean, of course, there's many male victims of sexual abuse as well, but just giving examples. Or, I mean, Tehran, a city of 10 million people being evacuated. Imagine that being Manhattan. Always we need this, like, imagine it happening to me. But I find that quite sad, actually, that we need to do that. Actually, I think, wouldn't it be better if we don't need to make this practice of imagine it being my child before I care or act or empathize? And this, for me, is what in the essay Alicja says of others in their otherness and not in their likeness or not in their similarity. And I don't think that today we succeed very much in that. And it has to do with power. While we tell stories...
You said power, and I think, Laurent, you... I want you to ask to read something, because I think that this is a kind of like the opening statement of what your book is about, and I think it also maybe points towards that same direction.
You want me to read my...
Yes.
Okay. So
please.
I'm going to speak French, don't worry, because it's going to be written in English up there. It's the same thing. Quand on commence à regarder le monde sous un prisme féministe, on finit forcément par en arriver là. Réfléchir au sexisme, ça amène en ligne droite à réfléchir au sort des malades, des migrants et migrantes, des handicapés, de la nature, des animaux, de tout le vivant en somme. Si on se mettait vraiment, collectivement, à penser comme cela, à sortir de l'obsession de la liberté individuelle pour caresser l'épiderme du monde d'un regard traversant et mobile. Alors on comprendrait que l'urgence est de sauver le vivant, toutes les vies humaines, mais aussi animales.
Yeah. So what does it take? So how can we... This all-encompassing gaze. So we just heard of Yusra's doubt of whether we can connect that. But how do you look at the capacity of literature to help us enlarge that gaze? Or is there another way?
Well, yes, there is another way. This passage in my book is part of a chapter where I speak about ecofeminism, which is a movement that is very linked to all the care ethics. And in this thinking, it's always really hard to talk about it because there is this movement that wants to stop separating the brain and the heart. And it's something that we're so used to doing in our occidental way of thinking that we don't even realize. We think there is on one side and rational way of thinking, and then there is the heart, the feelings, the emotion, where actually it's also linked. It's impossible to disentangle the both way we have to interact with others. We're always using the rational and the emotional part. And actually it's even weird to name them differently. So ecofeminism is a movement in which actually like writing a political speech or climbing on a boat and trying to reach Gaza has the same impact, the same power as, I don't know, dancing on a stage or hugging a tree or praying or singing or like, you know, hugging people. And ecofeminism just tries to take out this idea that some thoughts, some ideas are more powerful, have more impact on the world than others. And it's a way of taking out the verticality to go in a way of seeing the world and life as something more horizontal. And I know it sounds really weird or maybe a bit witchy said like this. Actually, one of the biggest ecofeminist thinker actually claims herself as a witch. She's called Starhawk, and right now she's one of the biggest opponent to Donald Trump in the US. She's like writing letters every day to everyone in the US to tell them how to act. And she's telling them to write to their representative in Congress and to go on strike and to vote, but she's also telling them to dance and to write poetry and to sing. And when I was listening to Yusra about how hard it is for you to write right now because of all this pain and all this care you have, I couldn't help thinking, but still, humans always keep on writing, and it's incredible to see how from the biggest genocides and human dramas in history, there has always been art coming out. I'm pretty 100% sure that people right now in Ukraine or in Gaza, they sing, and there are people writing, and we even see like videos of children dancing right now in the places where the war is, because human can't help it. It's part of our being to create all the time and to connect with something that is not rational, that doesn't have to be taught in school or written in books, because it's so intuitive. So I think, yeah, it would be interesting to start thinking with the heart.
Yeah. So you mentioned Trump, and I want to bridge the gap to your work, because you already mentioned it in the beginning. Philip, I just called you your last name. Philip, because you, like you already mentioned, you in your work also try to apply this imagination to the people who are maybe who are following an ideology that's quite far from your own. I can say this because you told me. How do you feel about using art in that way, or were you trying to create space in your head or in your heart, or what were you going through when you were writing these passages?
Well, I wanted to find out when I was a correspondent in New York 10 years ago, was when the whole Trump movement started, and I started talking to and portraying those alt-right, that's what they were called back then, those alt-right figures, like people who tried to create a right-wing movement that was young and cool and hip and sometimes even queer. And these people came basically from the same background that we do. They listened to the same music. They were oftentimes former left-wing counterculture people, and they all of a sudden turned to the right and supported Trump and the MAGA movement. And I always felt limited with my journalistic tools, as I explained earlier. And then I thought, okay, what would it take for one of those alt-right people to actually convince someone like me, who has my experiences and comes from where I come from? What would it take to draw someone on the other side? And then it's a family novel. And the oldest son, he used to be a literature professor in New York at Columbia University, and he got fired due to a Me Too scandal that he was involved in. And after he got fired, he hit rock bottom, didn't know what to do, and he had an acquaintance that he knew from his neighborhood who lived around the corner, same age, a cool guy, founded a cool magazine 20 years ago, and now became one of those right-wing figures. And this right-wing figure then tries to seduce him, all his sorrow and all his hurt that he got fired. And he said, I understand you, the same thing happened to me, and the little piece that we're listening to.
You've set up the scene perfectly.
Yeah. The little piece that we're listening to now is when they're meeting in a bar in New York, and this guy from this family, the oldest son who got fired as a professor, he asked them, "What do you want? What are you trying to convince me about? What do you want me? Where do you want me to come? Where do you need me to go?" And this is the answer that I'm reading now. Formulated by this right-wing figure. Where do you want me to go? Zum Spaß, zur Leichtigkeit, zu uns Rebellen, zu denen, die aufbegehren gegen die kranke Wokeness und ihre Cancel Culture, zu denen, die sich nicht ständig als Opfer fühlen von Rassismus, Chauvinismus, Ungleichheit und Unterdrückung, you name it, sondern sich benehmen wie Erwachsene, nicht wie quengelnde Babys. Kommt zu Menschen, die reif genug sind, zu wissen, dass das Leben nicht immer ein Spaziergang ist, dass man Verletzungen davonträgt, dass man beleidigt wird und es immer ein harter Kampf bleiben wird. Zu denen, die wissen, dass die westliche Zivilisation des späten 20. Jahrhunderts das Beste war, was die Menschheit zustande gebracht hat und die das verteidigen wollen.
Can we wait? Yes. Maybe we can give 1 minute to catch up, everyone. Yes. Yes. Okay, let's start from the beginning.
Where to anyway? Zum Spaß, zur Leichtigkeit, zu uns Rebellen. Zu denen, die aufbegehren gegen die kranke Wokeness und ihre Cancel Culture. Zu denen, die sich nicht ständig als Opfer fühlen von Rassismus, Chauvinismus, Ungleichheit und Unterdrückung, you name it. Sondern sich benehmen wie Erwachsene. Nicht wie quengelnde Babys. Kommt zu Menschen, die reif genug sind, zu wissen, dass das Leben nicht immer ein Spaziergang ist, dass man Verletzungen da.
I hope you all had a good break. Is this micro on? Is this mic? Yeah. We start? I hope you had a good break. Maybe formulated some stories of hope. Maybe read some stories of hope. Maybe just, talked about the great panel we had before. And now, before starting with the new program point, we also want to talk with you, the audience. And since this forum has the title Art Against the Tyrants, we were wondering, okay, what is a good depiction of a tyrant that you read? Do you have is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe first reactions, just don't be shy. Okay, 1 second, I'm coming right here.
At the beginning of Trump 2, I read Mary Trump's biography of the Trump family. And I thought it was a wonderful analysis of the banality or of how a tyrant structure. It's not a tyrant structure; it's a structure of that feeds into somebody becoming a tyrant. So I try to remember the title now, but it was the biography of the Trump clan.
Interesting. Has someone else read that book? Maybe perhaps knows the title. No. The Apprentice.
That film, The Apprentice, how he got his ideas.
This was by the niece.
The niece of Trump. Okay.
Basically, it's the daughter of the brother of Trump who died.
Oh, okay.
She's a clinical psychologist, and she wrote a fantastic book on the family, on her family.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Is there another story that comes to mind on a tyrant? I feel like there's also in children literature. There's also always this evil tyrant. So it can be here.
Maybe somebody who is having a serious problems herself, and then projects it on control and controlling actually free thinking and art and culture and literature and everything because it's afraid.
Is there someone that you think of when you describe that? A character?
Hitler.
Not a fictional character.
No, not a fictional character, indeed. And also, I think in Greek mythology there might be some really great depictions. And I'm going to introduce. Now it's my turn to introduce. Born in 1968 in Athens, Dimitra Kolliakou is a graduate of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, and she holds a PhD in linguistics from the University of Edinburgh, where she taught at the University of Newcastle and in Paris. She's published 3 novels and a collection of concentric novellas, and has been awarded the Jim Wilson Prize for the first time author by the National Book Center of Greek, and the Athens Prize for Literature. She's here at the invitation of the Greek Embassy. Can I have a warm applause for Dimitra Kolliakou?
Thank you very much. I'll just correct a minor thing. You know how Dimitra is the name of the ancient goddess, so and Dimitri is usually the adjective, so male. So I'm Dimitra, but it's, yes.
You have an interesting keyword there, the ancient goddess, because in a bit you're also going to be reading from your book, Calypso. An ancient Greek mythology, Calypso is the protector. What can these ancient mythologies also tell us about, let's say, modern tyranny?
I can maybe say something about tyrants as viewed in antiquity. So when you asked the question, the first character that came to my mind, a very well-known character that is the protagonist of one of the most famous Greek tragedies, and this is Oedipus. So known as Oedipus Rex, but in Greek it's Oedipus Tyrannus. So this is the word that the Greek sort of origin of the word, and even back then, the tyrant has no legitimate right to rule. So an absolute ruler, of course, not elected democratically. However, in some contexts back then, there was no negative connotation necessarily, right? So we're talking about. And I think what I wanted to say about him, of course, everybody knows Oedipus because Freud was interested in him because he killed his biological father and slept with his mother, and they even had 4 children together. But I want to focus on something else, which is perhaps this concept of responsibility, even in case of ignorance. So in his case, the idea was that the most important crimes were committed unknowingly. So you know perhaps the story, baby Oedipus was abandoned to die because there was a prophecy. According to the prophecy, he would kill the father and so on. Some other king took him and they saved him, and when he grew up, he got the same prophecy that he would kill his father and so on. So to avoid this terrible fate, he left his adoptive parents. He didn't know he was adopted, and he went to... Well, he traveled, and at some point he bumped into the real father. And in a quarrel, because he was provoked, he killed him. And then after he solved some riddle as well, he got the throne, he got the widow, so his mother, Jocasta. And the tragedy now begins at the point when he is a king, and there is a plague ravaging the kingdom. And he thinks, oh, I want to help my people. So even though he's a tyrant, he wants to help his people back then. And he wants to discover the truth. So there is denial. In the beginning, people say to him, no, don't search. Maybe it's better not to find what happened and so on. But he persists, and he doesn't spare the pain. He doesn't spare himself the pain. So I think what's interesting in the story is that when he discovers that the reason for the plague is the fact that the former king, his biological father, was assassinated, so it's him, the culprit. So then, as you know, famously, he blinds himself and he asks to be exiled. So this is the tyrant that is associated with the concept of self-punishment that did exist back then. And if I may add very, very briefly, in the antiquity, there was always this idea that the tyrant will be punished. So they've always played in poetry with this idea that somehow, even during the dictatorship, there was a very famous poet who wrote a poem that was like, it's always this idea about tyrants back then.
So after the rise comes the fall and the punishment.
There will be this moment. Yes, that was the idea. Now, of course, we live in different times, and we feel that hope. Yes.
So now you brought some writing with you from your book Calypso. In a bit, you're gonna introduce your writing, where it also the points in the book where we find ourselves. Then you have 2 fragments that you're going to read. In between, we will talk about it a bit. But so I give the stage to you now.
Talk about, because the theme of the evening is against indifference, what came to my mind is the fact that we know that thousands of refugees perish in the Mediterranean, and many people seem indifferent about this fact, in the sense that, well, you know, for whatever reason. I mean, there might be, you talked a lot about this in the first part, and it was quite interesting. So that was the starting point for this short novel, which is my 8th work of fiction. And it's the only one that has a mythological sort of basis. So Calypso is a figure from Homer. You know her from the Odyssey. She's the one that offered hospitality. There is an interesting detail about her name. The name is related to the verb cover, and cover as in protect. So she offered hospitality to Ulysses, to Odysseus, but also cover up the evidence. So hide, because I don't care, right? So it's this second one, this version of Calypso that is my own, the main character, and that gives the title to this short novel. And this is a short novel that, of course, was inspired by the cruel, I guess, the cruel migration management policies applied in the EU frontier countries, and also the concept of Greek hospitality. We have a word for this, philoxenia, so the love of strangers, of foreigners. So in a way, it's like on the one hand we have the love of strangers, which is a very concept that is sacred in all the great Greek texts, and on the other hand we have very, very xenophobic attitudes, terrible xenophobic attitudes that sort of coexist. So I'm not giving any answer here, I'm only putting the two things together. So perhaps I will read, with your permission, if that's okay, just the motto. So I wrote the motto myself. This is the little thing that appears on the first page. Ζει πάντα στο νησί της. Το μυστικό είναι το όνομά της, Καλυψό. Μα όσο κι αν καλύπτεται, ό,τι κι αν συγκαλύπτει, η θάλασσα τη βλέπει. Η θάλασσα τα βλέπει όλα. Κι όσα δεν θέλει να δει ο ουρανός. So you see the translation here, and of course you understand what this refers to. Shall I continue? So here in this book we have a stranger from the modern era. The word refugee is never mentioned because it is all written in a sort of mythical context, like it is as though it were a mythical sort of a myth of some kind. So the idea is that people know and they can repair this, and some of the scenes are directly inspired by reports of NGO organizations and videos that have been verified that show asylum seekers being deported, right? So there is this extract here where there is Calypso who doesn't care, but there is also the last remaining slave, an invented character, who is the one who's affected by the presence of this stranger in the island. So I'll read this very short extract. There are people on the island, she said to the nymph the next day. How did all these people end up on the island? She shouted to get the nymph's attention. From where she was standing, she could see a strip of sea. She could spot a ship far away. You're daydreaming, Calypso replied dryly, without changing position. She was sitting on a throne, unraveling a small ball of yarn, wrapping it like a bracelet around her left wrist. With every pull, the red ball jumped merrily, and the nymph had fine hands. They were hands that made her look compassionate. I'm telling the truth, she tried to press her. There are other people on the island, besides the stranger. Changing direction, Calypso began to unwind the thread from her left wrist and wind it back into the skein. You do well to sleep more, she commented at the end without looking at her. And not to dream so much. Too much dreaming is harmful.
I think you just already read both fragments, but now we can have a we can have a short talk about it. So why did you bring these two specific fragments to us, and how do you see it relating to Against Indifference? I think you already mentioned a bit, but maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, so indifference in this case, what is indifference? Indifference could be a number of things. It could be, I don't know, I don't want to know. Yes, this is a problem, but it's not high on our priorities because we have other problems. It could also be because we are in a painful situation. I cannot see what's happening around me. You know, I look at myself, I see my problem, I cannot see any further. So it could also be that. So I'm not judging. So indifference could also be this kind of thing, right? And it's not just necessarily, yeah, I can see it, I don't care, yeah? But it can also be a condition for totalitarianism to thrive. It could also be implicit collaboration. So there's a range of things.
Yeah.
So I think in this case, it was just to put the two things together. So Calypso, who's related to this concept of philoxenia, so love of strangers, supposed to protect and so on. She's protected in the past. She's protected the stranger whose name was Ulysses. There she did protect. Now she's not protecting. I think it's more or less that.
And then when the philoxenia is the love of the stranger, and the xenophobia, the fear of the stranger.
Exactly.
So how can literature then help us to love instead of fear? So.
I'm not sure.
I
think I think what struck me here, because the book does not explicitly talk about refugees, I think what was interesting to me, the book came out last June, in the reactions, there were people who saw it, and there were people who said, oh, it's a very poetic book. So I think it's the two different sort of attitudes. So people who saw it because they could recognize what they read about all the time, and there are people who...
Yeah, it's interesting how you play with that. Also, what you want to see, but also that's kind of covered up, but then also not. And then.
Well, I just think readers are. I believe in readers who are agents themselves. They sort of you don't tell them this is what I mean. You don't explain. So different people can see different things, and that's also interesting for the author to see that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the Calypso with us. So warm applause for Dimitra.
Thank you, Dimitra. Sorry. Yes, I want to ask my second panel to join me here. Violet's, once again, introducing everyone. Alicja, we already know, so she can just come up directly. And then Viola will introduce.
Yes, so our next panelist is also is Markus Latik, or Matura, which is a pseudonym stemming from his long interest in Eastern culture. He is an Estonian writer and poet and author of 8 collections of poetry and a short novel. He has won the Gustav Sweets Literary Award and the annual County Culture Award of the Estonian Cultural Endowment. His work has been translated in 12 languages, and he contributes regularly to the Estonian national broadcast and is now part of the cultural festival Serin. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Matura is also a reviewer of film and literature. Yeah, thank you. Please come to the stage. And last but not least, I want to invite Olesia Kromechuk as a historian and writer to the stage. She received her PhD in history from the University College of London. She is the author of The Death of a Soldier Told by His Sister. And she has written for the New York Times, the New York Review of Books, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, where Philip also works, Prospect, and The New Statesman, and has delivered a TEDx talk on what the world can learn from Ukrainians' fight for democracy. She has taught the history of East Central Europe at several British universities and is currently the director of the Ukrainian Institute, London. Welcome.
Yes, welcome indeed. Yes, so we will continue to talk about how political... Yes, please get a mic so we can all hear you all. So we will continue to talk about how political literature could be or should be, and also how directly, we just heard Dimitra say, like, I give agency to my readers, but how explicit should literature be in spreading a message. Just very quick fire round. How, on a scale from 0 to 10, how political is your work. Alicia.
Well, I agree fully with what Laurent has said. Every point of view is political, so all my writing is political. 10.
10 out of 10.
On a scale from 1 to 10, am I on 25, 30, 100?
Okay. We might have selected you, maybe. Matura?
Well, maybe I should intrigue now. Everybody says 0. But I think it depends on what you define as political. But I think, generally speaking, I'm not very political.
Yeah. By what definition of political, then I think I should ask? Is it something you want to keep at bay to give yourself space to explore other themes, or?
Yeah, let's say thematically, I'm not really engaged with political themes so much, but I believe that any literature and any poetry is by nature social, because it presumes an interaction between the writer and the reader, and in that sense there is always a social, if you like, maybe in some degree you can call it political element to writing, but
yeah,
I
because
think
you brought a very short fragment of a poem by Ernst Enno, who was the foremost lyrical poet of Estonia of the beginning of the 20th century. You wanted to bring him in because people criticized him for not being political enough. Can you maybe tell us a little bit why he was criticized for that, and also what he wanted to do and why that speaks to you?
Well, I hope I'm not derailing now too much from the course, but I would say like that for me, any creation and any change... Is this on?
I think it is.
Okay. It starts from introspection, that the evil as rarely recognized itself as evil. So I think that also means that we should never presume ourselves to be unblemished, the unblemished good, that there should remain some level of introspection. And so for me, I don't believe so much in, for example, in the sort of left and right dynamics, or in the sense that one is good or the other is not. But I believe literature should remind us of something very humane and bring us, so to say, together in the, so to say, in the center of what it means to be human. So in this particular case, Ernst Enno, yeah, he was in his time, he was criticized for not being political, but I think in another way that he was directing the reader to a more introspective or spiritual pursuit. I think at the same time he was pointing at something which was missing in the debate at the time.
I think we have
I mean,
yeah, what was he pointing? Yeah, what was he pointing at? Maybe you can read it out for us, or you can read it from there. Okay. That's easier.
Yeah, all falling into silence around you, deep within. What's in the past is gone now. What's coming, beckoning. Broken melodies around me that I never will forget. Where was it that they took you? A song without an end. Well, apparently, or on the surface, nothing political, but I think it provides certain counterpoint to the tendencies which could become totalitarian. I mean, wasn't it that Hannah Arendt said, I don't remember the exact quote, but didn't she say something like, totalitarianism is a singular definition of truth, or something like this, that if definition of world or things becomes very singular, that only one definition is correct, then we should go back to some bit of introspection. That's my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. How do you listen to that, Alicja?
Well, I'm always surprised when people say, well, as a writer, I have nothing to do with politics, or this is not political. I think there is a misunderstanding. A writing does not have to deal with politics or political writing. The fact that you can write about something else, that is exactly because you are living under a certain political umbrella. Even now, we sitting here, you as a woman that is moderating, me as a speaker, that's because of the political umbrella we are living in. So that is a political thing. And it's in that sense that all those poems and my writing is political. It's not that everything deals with politics constantly. And I think we are not enough aware of the fact that not writing on politics is a luxury that we thank to politics. And in that sense that it's a political viewpoint. So I think if you look at it like that, then maybe we can all give ourselves a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, and someone who is also definitely making that point is a Polish poet, a very famous one.
Yes,
and
yes.
you brought a poem by her as well to make this point, I guess.
Exactly. Is it the moment to read this poem?
This is the moment
because
to
I
read the
brought
poem.
A beautiful poem by Wisława Szymborska, Nobel Prize winner, and a very wise woman, and she has exactly written a poem about the fact that if you want it or not, all you do touches on politics or is political. And I will read it in Polish and you have the translation. Title: Dzieci epoki. Jesteśmy dziećmi epoki. Epoka jest polityczna. Wszystkie twoje, nasze, wasze dzienne sprawy, nocne sprawy, to są sprawy polityczne. Chcesz czy nie chcesz, twoje geny mają przyszłość polityczną. Skóra, odcień polityczny. Oczy, aspekt polityczny. O czym mówisz, ma rezonans. O czym milczysz, ma wzmowę. Tak czy owak, polityczną. Nawet idąc borem lasem, stawiasz kroki polityczne na podłożu politycznym. Wiersze apolityczne też są polityczne. A w górze świeci księżyc. Obiekt już nie księżycowy. Być albo nie być, oto jest pytanie. Jakie pytanie? Odpowiedz, kochanie. Pytanie polityczne. Nie musisz nawet być istotą ludzką, by zyskać na znaczeniu politycznym. Wystarczy, żebyś był ropą naftową, paszą treściową czy surowcem wtórnym, albo i stołem obrad, o którego kształt spierano się miesiącami, przy jakim pertraktować o życiu i śmierci, okrągłym czy kwadratowym. Tymczasem ginęli ludzie, zdychały zwierzęta, płonęły domy i dziczały pola, jak w epokach zamierzchłych i mniej politycznych.
Thank you. Alicja, you said you were a 25 out of 10. I assume some of that growth can be attributed to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But have you always felt that everything is political?
Look, I'm a woman and I'm Ukrainian. I have no choice but to be political. I also come from, well, I'm also a historian and I come from the part of the world that if you're not interested in politics, politics will be interested in you. And all these recent statements that culture is about politics, I think are often used as an excuse to not read that culture critically, to not see the responsibility that creatives carry, and to not see the consequences that culture can have on destruction of another culture. If we speak about Ukrainian culture, we've in Ukraine, we've not had the privilege of a long-lasting tradition of statehood, which usually guarantees credibility, epistemic trust, a position on a platform much like this. So we also didn't have statesmen and women to kind of revere and to celebrate. maybe that's a good thing. In fact, I'm sure it's a good thing. Not the lack of statehood, but not having statesmen to revere. But who we had cultural figures, we had writers, we had poets, we had artists who served as an anchor to our identity. And of course, those who deny our subjectivity and deny our identity, and now I'm talking specifically about those in the Kremlin, know that culture for us is highly political. It is that anchor of identity. So they attack culture too. And that is why the war that we're observing is a genocidal war. It's not just about the destruction of statehood, it's also the destruction of our culture. And let's not forget that in Ukraine now, being an artist, an author, without being involved in the political life of the nation is simply impossible, because you're either drafted into the army, you volunteer, or you support the army by other means. Because if you're not involved in this war effort, then to some degree at least, then there is no space for neutrality. I mean, neutrality is taking sides. We've discussed this very well. So again, the Russians know this, and they attack the people of culture directly. And there were hit lists that they used in occupied territories, where they specifically targeted people of culture because they knew the role that culture has for Ukrainian society. So yeah, it's a highly political business. I mean, it's highly political business for all of us, but some of us can afford to pretend that it isn't.
Yeah, and one of the people who really had an eye for this importance and this care that is also, and the courage, I suppose, that it takes to take care of that culture, is someone that you wanted to honor here this night. Could you introduce her to us?
I will. Yes, it's very important for me to bring this writer with me now, wherever I go, because she can't be here with us. This is someone whose work I admired and whom I knew. Her name is Victoria Amelina. She was a writer. She then, after the full-scale invasion, started to write poetry as well. So she used to write fiction, and she couldn't write fiction after the full-scale invasion. So she found a different medium, which was, it's interesting that she chose poetry as something that's immediate and that allows to maybe transmit the brutality of the destruction of life that we're watching in Ukraine in that different way. And she also trained herself as a war crimes investigator. So she traveled around liberated territories after the Russian occupiers left or were kicked out, and spoke to people. And it was extremely important for her to write the testimony of those people. And that's another role that we have in literature now. It's an opportunity to keep the record of war, and also a type of justice when you are heard, when somebody listens to you and says, yes, it's it's recorded now. It's important that I know that you've been wronged. Your case might not end up in the future Nuremberg-type trial, but I heard you, and it's a type of administration of justice. And she was killed in a missile strike in 2023 in Kramatorsk while she was dining with fellow writers from Colombia in a restaurant. It was a targeted strike, and by that point she had already written 60% of her non-fiction book, which she was already writing in English. We can talk about the choice of the language. And then after her death, her partner and a group of editors, her friends, put the book together. And so the book has just received the highly prestigious Orwell Prize in the UK, fully deserved, because when you read the first chapters that she completed, there's fantastic nonfiction. It's absolutely brilliant, super high standard. And as you stay with that book, it disintegrates in your hands, because they did not try to fill the gaps, the editors. They put the notes that they found in her laptop, in her phone and other places together. And so we watch the life interrupted. We watch it collapse. We watch it disintegrate, decompose in our hands. And that's a really powerful experience to be present with. The extract I want to read is from a chapter called Invisible Refugees. And the book itself is called Looking at Women, Looking at War. When I was evacuating my family and a few books from my library, including the executed Renaissance anthology, another more important evacuation happened on the other side of Ukraine. On the morning of the 8th of March, 2022, the territorial defense soldiers helped the staff of the Kharkiv Literature Museum to load manuscripts, letters, and first editions of the Ukrainian writers of the 20th century on a train heading west. Tatiana Polubchuk, the director of the museum, boards the train too. It is hard for her to leave the city, which itself is crucial for Ukrainian literary history. But she is the one responsible for the unique collection, almost everything tangible that is left from the executed Renaissance generation. She won't leave the collection unattended, even for a second. If a missile were to hit, she would prefer to be near it. The passengers on the train flee Kharkiv, Balaklia, and the Izum area. Only one compartment has no passengers, unless the writers whose papers Tatiana is rescuing are invisible refugees. Their archive would mean nothing to the rest of the world. They are the weird ones, Ukrainians by choice. They are the executed Renaissance, slaughtered, buried in mass graves in the 1930s, and prohibited from being remembered in the Soviet Union. They are the Ukrainian 60ers, sent to the camps in the 1960s and 70s for daring to remember. Their works were not translated in time to become part of world literature and European discourse. But for people like Tatiana Polubchuk, who is guarding them in the dark, they mean the world. It wasn't always like that for us, though. Like me, Tatiana grew up speaking Russian, reading Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and Bulgakov. But once a student enchanted by the Russian classics, she visited the Kharkiv Literature Museum, intrigued by the fact that her hometown had a hidden Ukrainian literary history she had no idea about. She worked at the museum as a volunteer, together with other young people who gathered in the museum, including the future literature star Serhiy Zhadan. She resolved to help the rest of Ukraine learn the truth about the 20th century writers. The key to this truth was on 9 Cultuurhuis Street in Slovo House. Its walls, unlike most Ukrainians, remembered the writers of the executed Renaissance, as they had all lived in this one big house with 5 entrances and 66 flats, meant for the best of Ukrainian intelligentsia. Contrary to the typical Soviet blocks, Slovo House had spacious rooms full of light, which turned out to be just holding cells. Almost everyone there was doomed for arrest, suffering, and death. A black car would come at night, and footsteps were heard on the stairs. The writers and their families froze in their beds. Are they coming for me? Then the sense of relief when a neighbor is taken, not you, made them feel ashamed, perhaps. Many feel the same now when the enemy airplane drops its bombs, but not on you this time. Your survival instinct tells you to be happy, but you don't want to be happy. Instead, you want to remain human.
Thank you. Yeah, you already alluded to it. It's interesting that she writes in English where she's describing this preservation of Ukrainian language and literature. Do you know why she did this?
Well, it's kind of in the passage that I read to you just now. She says that this archive, this fantastic collection of the body of literature of the writers who were destroyed, would mean nothing to the world. They were not translated in time to become part of European canon or whatever discourse and world literature. And so she was in a hurry to make sure that her book doesn't end up in the in a big pile of books, untranslated, unshareable, unreadable, and so on. Because let's face it, how many of us bother to read non-imperial languages? Not very many. So that was a very pragmatic choice. The other thing that's worth remembering is that Ukrainian nation, Ukrainian literature, much like Ukrainian nation, is multilingual. We are all at least bilingual. Most of us are multilingual. We all know at least one imperial language, and then several, some of them us one indigenous language. So we have a variety. You had a discussion here on Crimean Tatar literature and culture a couple of days ago. Well, there you go. That's one of the languages of Ukraine. And of course, there's Polish, there's German, there's Yiddish, there's Hungarian, Romanian. Ukrainian Russian version of Ukrainian. Ukrainian version of Russian. There you go. I Ukrainianized Russian. Why not? So yeah, and there's been this simplification in the media, so often sort of splitting Ukrainian nation and also Ukrainian cultural heritage into Russophone and Ukrainian, therefore pro-Russian and pro-Western and so on. And I mean, it's just laziness really on our part not to dig deeper, not to understand what linguistic diversity really means on the ground when people can switch halfway through the sentence from one language to another and everybody understands everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I might be making a little bit of an awkward bridge. I'm not sure, but I do think there is a connection, because you've been speaking of this endeavor to remember and not to let things go to dust and to forget things, and how political this effort is. And I don't want to make your poem more political than you yourself think it is, but I do want you to ask you to read your poem, because I do think it speaks to this libraries of books that are forgotten or can be forgotten, and how to deal with that.
Yeah, sorry, I'll stand up for that. Can we have the English for it as well? Because I'll try to read it in a very unknown language, Estonian. We have 1 million speakers, so that's, I don't know, what percentage of Amsterdam?
100%, almost.
All right. Villa number 24. Olen juba mõnda aega kõndinud mööda tühja maja, tühja tube, mööda tühja koridore, kus kunagi kihas elu. Kui küsiksid, ei oskaks ma öelda, kui kaua olen siin olnud või kellega. Ma ei oskaks öelda, kas olen veel siinses või ehk juba mõnes teises ilmas. Mälestused kooruvad seintelt nagu värv, mis aja lakkamatule rõskusele vastu ei suuda pidada. Ahel juhtub, et otsin prahi hulgast meeleheitlikult nimesid. Joosef, Sigmund, Nikolai. Aga kindlasti ravis siin keegi oma meelelaadi viljatust. Promeneeris aeglasel ja tähtsal sammul peatänavat pidi, aujärk kõrgel kui valge päevavari. Enam ei juhtu siin muud, kui et laed langevad sisse. Vihm vallutab kõik, alateadvus nõriseb mõistuse katusest läbi, tegelikkusse meie ümber, kus fin de siècle on ühtlasi fin d'une idée, d'un rêve. Nõnda pole ime, et seal, kus kord oli speranza, on nüüd vaid varingu eest hoiatav silt ja nurga taga paar, kuhu ükski sisse sõitnu ei julge liiga kauaks pidama jääda. Eks lootusedki täituvad ja laostumine toob õnnistava rahu, mis kasvab maailma peale, nagu kõiki ülendav alustaimestik või võib-olla melanhoolia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take your glasses. Yeah, why did you want to read this poem?
I'm not sure. I think even though this poem is written about 10 years ago, it somehow speaks, for me, it speaks about the current time. Of course, I said, I'm probably going to be eating my words now. I said I'm not political, but, and then I say I'm actually writing about the current time. But I have a feeling, I mean, this is just a feeling, you might agree or not agree. I have a feeling that we're kind of approaching an end of an era, or maybe kind of approaching a transition point. And what this era has been is not fully sure to me, and where we will go from here is also not fully sure to me, because I guess we haven't maybe fully decided yet actually where we will go, or we don't have the common idea yet enough where we would want to go. So, I mean, this poem was written in Romania, in Transylvania, in a place called Borsec, which used to be, I mean, it was a big health resort for a long, long time, since Austrian Empire, and later on it was the, resort for the communist elite of Nicolae Ceausescu and his gang, so to say. And after that, strangely enough, the place came largely to ruin. It was kind of left alone, and the city degraded, which could be lamented, but at the same time, in a way, nature took over. And maybe less as a particular idea, but maybe as a metaphor, it kind of speaks to me in this current time that that there is a sort of, I mean, transition means anyhow that something is coming to an end, and it might be in some way a loss. Maybe we have lost something that we now need to re-find or reinvent. And the picture can be a little more drastic for a while, but and melancholy. But after a while, grass will start growing again. So I believe in a positive future. When it will arrive is a different question. I mean, maybe to complement a little bit what I said before, I like the point in the essay that you said that, I'll be misquoting now, but that totalitarian impulse is not in the past or something like this. And I think it will never be completely in the past. We will always need to stay vigilant towards that, but it will probably go in phases. There is more pressure at one point and less pressure at another. I mean, I guess we are generally this kind of could be characterized, three of us, as the East European panel here. And
you might disagree with that.
I mean, Estonians generally
Central European.
Yeah. I mean, Estonians generally also don't like to be called East European. They like to be called North European. But I mean, I was born in the Soviet Union, and my grandfather was deported to Siberia. I mean, this was, of course, before me, for the crime of owning a horse that already made him enemy of the people. And he was given 5 years, and when in the police station he saw a woman who had also been arrested and whose hands had been tied together with a barbed wire. And he lashed out at the officers. He was given another 10 years for that. So I just think that I wouldn't want to return to that era where owning a horse is a political question, or objecting to a woman's hands being tied with a barbed wire is a political question. I think it's like it's a human question, and I just hope that wherever we're going from here, that we are able to remind ourselves and maybe remind others through art and literature more of that. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, yeah. Alicja, can you speak a little bit to this very beautiful point that Matura is making of transitioning times and this decay, but also this possibility of grass growing again? Is that something that you can make space for in your head at this time, or is that just so out of the question that it is
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about hope quite a lot, mostly looking and failing to find it. And I was writing a piece about hope and not getting anywhere because I didn't feel any hope. And then I turned to Ukrainian classics, to Lesia Ukrainka, Ukrainian fin de siècle modernist feminist writer, absolutely fantastic. And remembered one of the poems that she wrote, and we all learned at school, but even though I remembered it, I didn't necessarily make that connection later on in life, which the title of which is Contra spem spero, Without Hope I Hope. And I translated it as a hopeless hope. It's a poem about hopeless hope. And I think that's what sustains Ukrainians, and I'm sure there are other people who could identify with that, is this idea of planting seeds even though you know that you will most probably not be enjoying the harvest, but someone will. The next generation later, it's absolutely vital that you plant those seeds, despite all hope. So it's this kind of hopeless hope. Maybe this is the kind of connection I can make. There's a story from the recent ecocide attempt in Ukraine that Russia staged in Kakhovka Dam. We probably all heard. 2023, they blew up the Kakhovka Dam, and the reservoir flooded lots of villages, killed lots of people, took a lot of life and animals and nature, and sort of spurred ecocide into action. But we also, you know, what appeared in the place of the reservoir was essentially a kind of deserted land. And a little while later, willow trees started to grow there, in spite all hope. Yeah, I mean, that's what I hold on to on very dark days.
Yeah,
and literature helps me in that.
Yeah. Do you still want to read the last fragment?
Would you like me to?
Yes. No, I think because I think you've kind of you wrote this beautiful book about the death. It's called "Death of a Soldier," told by his sister, and it's beautiful, and it's about grief, and it's personal, and you chose this very political fragment. So I do want you to read it, to finish on it, because I think it's important to you. Yeah.
Thank you. It's shorter, I promise, than the one before, so hopefully you'll all be able to go home soon or get a drink. It's to continue the conversation that Yusra started in the panel before, that empathy is good, but it's you said it's a first step, yeah, or something like that. It's not enough. And I would also say that sometimes maybe it could be harmful, because it kind of creates this space for us to feel quite good about ourselves, that, we care, we express deep concern, and then we don't do anything about it. So Alicia, you said we have hearts, let's remember to use them, or something like that, which I really liked. And I would like to also say we have agency, let's remember to exercise it, because I think the next step has to be action. We have to we have to learn, we have to make an effort to learn. So this is about that. So it's an extract from The Death of a Soldier told by a sister, called Opportune Moment. The chapter is called Opportune Moment. You'll see why. Ukraine continued to be misunderstood. It was just too complex to get one's head around it. And at the same time, there was no pressing need to get one's head around it. The occupation of Crimea and Russian aggression in the Donbass brought Ukraine back into newsrooms. As Ukrainians kept losing lives in the fight for their territorial integrity, they were gaining clarity of vision about the country they were building with blood, sweat, and tears. But having expressed its deep concern, the world moved on. Ukraine fatigue descended until the full-scale invasion of February 2022, when things began to change, and the world decided it was time to discover this terra incognita. You've been in touch with us before with some ideas for collaboration on a project on Ukraine, haven't you? I heard this question from the program manager of yet another important cultural institution that had decided to do an event on Ukraine, but had quickly figured out that it didn't have in-house expertise to make sure that they got it right at such a sensitive time. That was me, yes, I responded. But it didn't seem to have worked out for you then, I added, cautiously trying to make a point, but not wishing to offend. It didn't. Well, that's because my interlocutor looked for the words to explain why a project on Ukraine had not seemed timely for the organization a year or so ago, the last time we spoke. Ukraine was not trending then. There was no war on, right? Except there was a war on. But we in Western Europe could afford to ignore it to the point that we seem to have persuaded ourselves that Russia's war in Ukraine began on the 24th of February 2022. The cultural institution I was talking to could no longer afford to ignore the war, if not because it was claiming so many more lives and threatening security in Europe as a whole, then because it would look bad when other similar institutions had done an event on Ukraine and theirs hadn't. It didn't work out last time, that's true, but now is such an opportune moment, said my interlocutor.
Thank you. I would like to thank this panel very much. I would like to thank all the speakers of tonight very much. I would like to ask Viola to come up to the stage to thank all the institutes that contributed. I want to end with that, and then I want to give the final words to Yusra to send us home with some more poetry.
Yes, also from my side, thank you for all the speakers who were here tonight. The Balie, Veronica, thank you for also including us in the program of the Forum on European Culture. It's been great also working with you. And thank you for to my colleagues from the EUNIC network. Thank you to the British Council for organizing the workshop. Thank you for the Flemish Institute Brakke Grond, the Polish Culture, and the Institut Français. Thank you to the Greek Embassy, the Estonian Embassy, and the Embassy of Ukraine.
Yes, and then I said it already, we are still here at the Forum of European Culture. There is a lot of art. The Polish, we have Ukrainian artists in all the rooms. We have the Polish contribution to Venice Biennale. In the Pleinzaal over there, we have art outside. We also have an interview marathon, so if you haven't heard enough yet for tonight, you can walk in there. It will go on till 1 o'clock at night, so you can also first take a drink. Do come back tomorrow or sometime else if you happen to find yourself in Amsterdam. Then I'd like to have the final word to hand it to Yusra.
Thank you for that, by the way. Thank you also for the beautiful conversation. Does this work, or should I take a... It's okay. Okay. The poem is in Dutch, unfortunately, but it will be, parts of it will be on the screen. In de slagschaduw van de verlichting liggen lichamen. Wat weten zij? Wat is van hen geweten, mogen zij weters zijn? Wie kwam voor hen en wist ver voor de meester en hoe lang al hebben zij geweten? Waarheden over de bomen en de sterren. De wind en wateren, de aarde en hoe voor haar te zorgen, waarin hun harten en gebeenten ruist hun weten. In de slagschaduw van de verlichting spreken lichamen. Wie heet hen wijs? Wie wijst hen aan op sterk water, hun tong en de vorm van hun schedels en lacht wanneer zij water gieten over gesmolten lood? Wanneer zij roepen, de kinderen, en beloven dat de doden leven onder ons. Wie weet hen te geloven? Hoe heten zij in een taal die hen niet wist? In de slagschaduw van de verlichting reizen lichamen. Zie hoe ze dansen. De donkerte barst uit in een open veld als een vuist, een razende bloem, zonne in elke windrichting. Op een dag zullen wij geweten. Lang nadat de gaarden en scholen in as zijn opgegaan, de torso's dichtgenaaid, het land verkocht. Wie zal hen huldigen en kronen? Hun namen onleesbaar, hun schaduwen afwezig in het schitterende licht. Dank u wel.